Hey, welcome! Happy Thursday night. This is SessionWell. My name is Adam Luke.
I'm Judy and
As always, we have Fred behind the camera. If you are looking to build a website, develop a promotional video, or generate leads to get more clients or customers, hit him up. He's right here. He's got all of his contact information in our description and running below us right now. But let's get over to our awesome guests. As you can see, it's a beard-heavy...
minus myself.
Yeah. Judy doesn't, but obviously, real Game of Thrones over here. So these are some awesome gentlemen. You are...
My name is Samuel Baney, and I'm in... Oh, I'll wait for your prompts.
No, please. Keep going.
Take over.
This is all you now.
Yeah.
Stand up and...
Well, I'm an associate marriage and family therapist. I work out of Christ Church the Valley in San Dimas, out of their Ranch Cucamonga location. And I teach classes at Hope University.
There you go.
Which classes do you teach?
I teach Intro to Psych, Community Care, Social Issues, and Christian Principles in Marriage and Family Therapy.
Nice. Are you teaching in the undergrad and grad campus? Or like program? Or the...
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome.
Nice.
Yay.
Who the heck are you?
my license out. Mitch Pohl, associate marriage and family therapist. Getting closer to that licensure.
There you go.
Slowly but surely.
Slowly.
Yeah, more slowly, and sometimes not as sure as I'd like. But.
Yeah, who's Shirley?
Yeah, exactly. What was that line? Don't call me Shirley.
Don't call me Shirley.
Yeah, I'm serious, and don't call me Shirley. But yeah, and then also teach at Hope, online, graduate and undergraduate,
Nice.
counseling theories and research methods. So that's
you have
always
research
a
methods?
good time for the undergrad.
Oh my, that's so
I taught on ground one semester for grad, and that was. Well, anyway, yeah.
Well, everyone likes
happened.
research, so...
That's right. Now we're doing research. Yeah, I think I've learned more now than I knew back then. So that's
Good
that was
old
fun.
alternative facts. Anyways,
Right.
let's move on.
Fake news.
Wait, where are you doing therapy?
Right now I'm at a community mental health clinic in Long Beach.
Oh,
Public
nice.
Health Center. So
What
Yeah.
population do you serve?
about half my case list is the youngest I've had is 4 years old,
Wow.
all the way up to 18, and then the second half of my case list is a welfare to work program. So that's anywhere from 18 on up to, I think the oldest client I had, or the most vintage client I had was 66. So
Wow.
yeah, so it's good. I'm glad I have a nice mix of the two, because working with kids was used to working with youth or adults, and then you kind of get in with kids, and it's a bit of an adjustment at first, for sure. So it's been good to split it up a little bit.
So the reason why we have you guys here is because both of you have some pretty awesome skill sets that not a lot of people have. And so let's talk about what tonight is about. So we're talking about, the title is Healing Healers, the vulnerability and challenges to pastoral care. The reason why we're bringing this up is because I had an awesome conversation with Mitch about 2 weeks ago on the fact that we aren't really talking about providing space for the healers of our communities, of our society, basically our mental health professionals, and also our spiritual leaders. If you are in Southern California, you've heard that there was an individual who was a pastor who took his life over the summer. And I remember reading about it. I didn't know the gentleman, but I was like, man, we have to find a time and a place to have a discussion about this. Because it's something that you don't really think about. You think about, pastors are, they own the popularity contest of the church is what some people think. But it's also a very lonely profession in certain dynamics. And so I'm so grateful that you guys were willing to come on here and talk about it.
Well, I appreciate you guys having the conversation.
Yeah.
Because it is such an important topic.
Yeah. So, right out the gate, I guess, as pastors, how do you, is there friendship that develops at churches that you can actually have real friendship? Or is it like showing up to work on Sundays and you have like a level of professionalism and people don't, I don't know. I have no idea where we go with this podcast.
Well, can you maybe paint us a picture of, because I'm not that familiar with being on the other side. I'm usually just the attendee at church. Mm-hmm. So what is it what is life like as a pastor? What would your week look like? What would your Sundays look like? What does it look like with your family? all I've ever heard is that Sundays tend to be very busy for you guys, and then sometimes it's setting a boundary with family. Like, how do you be there for the community, but then also be there for your family and for yourself? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, you can ask my wife. She have a lot to say on the topic. No, it's very difficult. Traditionally, when you think about churches in a community, I mean, the community itself was always traditionally built up around the churches, and the church formed such a just a center of community life. Pastors and clergy, they're often on the front lines of human experience, right? So that, people are coming, with grief and loss and, life struggles, and, clergy are asked to be mediators and to counsel, and it's not just showing up on Sunday, right? So there's a lot that goes into that. And I feel like, in my experience, what I witnessed, a lot of pastors just aren't equipped to deal with the myriad issues, but then on top of that, equipped to handle just the stress and the burden and all of that. They carry so much, and then it's who do they talk to? Who can they go to? Who's safe? How do they process those things? How do they come to grips with maybe some questions about I don't know if I can do this. And then. That can be a real hard thing and very isolating and thing like you guys mentioned. Yeah.
What would be some of the hesitations for someone in the clergy to ask for help?
Well, I think there are quite a few. First, I think is simply the stigma attached to it, because here's an anecdote I think that really brought it home to me. I remember I was walking through the foyer of the church, and someone said to me, hey pastor, how's your walk going? I said, well, it's great. I said, okay, yeah, because we really depend on you. We're counting on you. And I had to say, don't put that on me. Right? But I think that it was really poignant, because it expressed verbally what I think I had felt, and I think what a lot of people have felt, just the unspoken expectations, that pastors are supposed to be at this, and certainly there should be a high level of morality and all this kind of stuff, but it's kind of like you're living in a fishbowl, so to speak, and everyone's kind of watching you, and that can just put tremendous pressure on you. And so to come to the place of, geez, I know I'm struggling with this thing, but I can't tell anybody, because what if it gets out? Right? People will lose faith in me, or this, right? And you start getting into all that kind of stuff, and that can be really difficult to navigate. And then there's also the feeling of, if I come to grips with the fact that maybe I am experiencing burnout, or maybe I am. I'm kind of doubting this. What does that say about my calling in life? I felt called to this. Am I now disqualified? Is God no longer for me? Or all of those
my
kind
faith.
of right. It's so much easier just to shove that down and keep going, keep fighting the good fight.
Yeah.
Because the implications of actually having to come to grips with that can be just tremendous.
Makes a lot of sense. And what about you, Mitch? You said that you were a youth pastor for a few years?
Yeah, I was a youth pastor for 8 years. Okay. And yeah, I to add off of what you said very well, was just, I think that we tend to create, and to go with the experience that you shared, we tend to create more idols out of pastors, priests, whatever they may be. We create idols more than we try to create apostles, I think.
Oh, isn't that true?
Right, and so I remember sometimes as a youth pastor in times of struggle where you would read the way that Paul would talk about himself, right? And it was almost like, okay, I want to talk about myself with humility, like it sounds like he's doing, but when I hear people say that, it sounds a little bit different. Almost intuitively, you can tell it's a little bit different. Like you have to say, oh yeah, I'm not perfect and I struggle. But like you said, everybody expects you to be more perfect than they are.
Yeah.
Right? And whereas, I mean, if we look back at all the saints, they were able to glory in their weaknesses. We don't promote that generally in the church, regardless of what your denomination is. That's just not promoted.
Yeah.
And so I think we're creating more idols, and this happens the same with therapists.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's more of an idol or a perfection than it is someone who is able to lead.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely a difference there. But we put those expectations on ourselves, and I think that because those expectations are put on us, so we adopt those expectations.
Yeah.
I definitely was not immune to that. You know, and I would have the kids come up to me and ask me sometimes, "Oh, hey, do you struggle with this too?" And the first few years, it was like, "Well, I used to. I, cross my fingers behind my back. Yeah, I'm still struggling with that. Probably more than you guys are. But if I say that, and they go home, oh yeah, Pastor Mitch struggles with this too. Pastor Mitch has got a pink slip in his box the next week. That's how it's going to be. So, right? I mean,
it's a sad truth
in the hallway. So,
see, I've never worked as a pastor, but I've been a part of a lot of different church administrations, whether from the sides. And like you said, it's amazing when you're sitting having conversations with, church administration, and there's like, well, we cannot say that we don't know, right? And what I mean by this is like, there are some questions that get asked to pastoral staff or just staff of churches that simply being honest, don't care how strong your faith in Christ is, you don't know why certain things happen in life.
Yeah.
But if you say that, that's not how we work. We have this tagline for every trauma or tragedy, and that's just what we say.
Yeah.
And so when you do have a pastor that goes, I don't know, or let me just sit here with you in that moment. Sometimes it's not as encouraged as we wish it was, right? And so we have that just a ton of weight on our pastors to always have the answer, or clergy, and it's just, you can't.
Right.
Plain and simple.
Well, and I think that goes along with burnout right there. And in fact, I just got a text from another therapist that I know this afternoon, and I told her I'd try to use this text in the podcast. Now I get to. It was like one of those things that said, it was talking about boundaries, right? Taking care of yourself. And one of them was, I don't need to have all the answers, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Right? But even as therapists or as clergy, we're expected, you have to have all the answers. Well, I personally don't have all the answers. There's things that I don't know about, but now I've got to have an answer for you. Yeah. And that's incredibly exhausting. And when we were going through grad school, it was like, oh yeah, you can sit in silence with your clients in session. Right? And remember when they had the exercises where they make us do that.
Class, yeah.
Right? I mean, people were crying and it was not the client.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the therapists are just losing it. Like, I can't, this is so awkward.
Yeah.
It's okay to not have the answers.
Yeah.
But again, that's not, like you in your experience, I'm sure you've had the same, like, we're expected to have those things. And that puts a lot of stress and burnout on us.
Yes.
Because I don't have them personally. So how do I give this to somebody else?
Well, then, of course, if somebody's asking you a question and you don't have the answer, now all of a sudden it becomes an issue for you.
Right. Right. Add another thing to your list. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it is true, because I think that as therapists also is like, I think that people think that we already took care of our stuff. Like, oh, I was broken a few years ago, and then like I'm healed now, and now I'm this like wonderful therapist, and I can help you with your healing. But it's like,
and
I think
all your life's answers.
Yeah, and that's totally fine, and therapy's going to fix everything. But I think that it's sometimes hard for us to also face, but also go through with our clients that we currently are also struggling, whether it's in our own marriage, our own family, death of a loved one, like, and so how do we help heal people, but be also in our own like healing cycle ourselves and our own brokenness? And is it okay for us to be that way? And how do we navigate all of that?
And that's a great point. That's a hard thing, because sometimes that's where the client is at, or the parishioner. They're at a place in their life where they need to believe that you've got it all figured out for you to be of any help to them.
Yeah.
Now, hopefully they come to a place of maturity and understanding themselves, that they understand others as well. They realize, like, hey, nobody has it all figured out, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. But it's so. Yeah, I think going along with what you said, I think it's it takes a lot of discernment on the part of the therapist or the pastor to know when to be revealing about those things and when to be.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
yeah.
I remember, I think most of us remember, a couple of years ago, we lost one of our professors, like Lisa Wilson.
Yeah.
Lisa,
And that was such a hard hit for our entire community.
Still don't believe it sometimes.
I know.
Yeah.
Every time I drive on the 91, I think of her. But it was the oddest thing because it was the first time where we were all MFTs and we had these students, we had other people in the community, but it was like we were all hurting. And how do we grieve even more in the loss of one of our own, but still try to help and heal and support everyone else that was grieving too? And that was just such a interest. I mean, like, it was awful, obviously, but it was just such a different experience.
Yeah. It was the way that I always go off metaphors, everything in life. It was like trying to be a cracked pillar, basically. Like there was a
That's a good one.
because especially as professors and whatnot, you had students that were, they were wrestling with it the same. I remember just sort of, Lisa Wilson always had this thing, trust the process. And I was just thinking, how can I be the most beneficial in this situation? I remember being at a staff meeting, and it was like, you know what? I had a student ask me questions, like, what's going on? And I just thought, I don't know. I don't know. I'm reeling from it just as much as you are, because I know for myself, she was my mentor.
Yeah,
she had helped me
so many
get
ways.
to where I was, and I was in that selfish mindset of like, I'm not going to be able to share getting licensed with her. I was just starting to become a colleague of hers, right? So there were a lot of these cool things that you were getting to achieve with her, and then they're not there. But I remember just the fact that it's like, in that situation, it would have done no one good for me to lie. Oh, well, it's going to be fine. Everything's... sometimes in life, it's not going to be fine, but you're going to survive.
Right.
And that is a message that not a lot of people want to swallow that pill. But it is a fact that, like, it's not going to be okay for a second. But we're going to thrive outside of this.
But then you're modeling for them that it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
I remember those students, because I was teaching there at the time too. I remember that so many of us were trying to be composed and try to be strong for our students. But it was like such an amazing thing because I think so many of the students knew how much the staff and like the faculty was affected, and so they wanted to basically pray for us. And it was an interesting flip because we're always trying to pray for them and like support them and surround them, but for them wanting to do that for us, it was amazing. But it was almost kind of like we had to allow that space for them to be able to care for us.
Right.
And so, have you guys faced that too? Just in church, have you allowed the congregation, the community to pray over you guys, since you're always kind of doing it for them?
Yeah, I think in some of the ministries that I ran there at the church, I tried to be more honest with having to be still very careful and having that pressure. But I tried to model that best that I could, and as flawed as it was, because I didn't by any means have that down perfectly. But yeah, I always I valued those times when we'd be having a leadership meeting or something like that, and my leaders would just like, hey Sam, we just want to pray for you, and it was just so freeing. It was so freeing. Be able to put my guard down, take the pastor hat off, and just be a fellow servant, a fellow worker, and I cherished those moments.
I think that's a powerful thing when people can see, whether it's pastor, clergy, or a therapist, see us allowing that space again, right? So like what you're saying, to have people just come around you and pray for you and actually accept that. Because, in life I've come to find that if you try to block any one aspect of a relationship, it's not a relationship.
That's right.
And so when we don't have that other side of that component where students can watch us wrestle, we can hold hands and pray, we can have those moments, or better yet, when you're doing this with clergy and have that side. If we don't have that vulnerability, then how do we ever ask those people to have that vulnerability with someone else? because it's exactly what you say. It's the modeling of it. So, have you guys worked with pastors as therapists now?
Yeah, on a few occasions I've had that I've had that privilege to do that.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
I mean, because like you said, that's just knowing other people, other friends of mine who have been youth pastors, have been pastors. It's always been the thing of like, who do you trust? Because as much as you feel like, oh, my elder board should be something I can trust, sometimes it's political and you don't feel you can trust that. Sometimes you think, well, I can trust the head pastor, and it's not that. One of my close friends, who's a pastor, his wife was like, it's the loneliest thing ever. I can't plug in anywhere. And so that's a strain, right? Because the pastor's kids and the pastor's wife don't have a place to plug in.
What's the fishbowl that you mentioned? The fishbowl. You can't afford to be that open and vulnerable, kind of a thing. Or you don't want that scrutiny, I think, to say like, okay, I'm going to connect with people, but I know I'm always going to be under the microscope. I mean, how real and how refreshing are your relationships at that point if you know that pressure's there, which makes the burnout worse. So now you can't connect with the people that you spend the most time with and have the most access to. So
I remember speaking to he's an old Lutheran pastor. I met him. We were doing a wedding, and he was getting near retirement, and he said, "Do you have a mentor?" I said, "I'm trying to run. I have people I talk to, but no, I don't." I was honest with him, and he said, "Why? You need to get one." And he even said, he said, it's not. Be smart about how you do it. It's not always the safest thing, but it's the most important thing. And he told me about how he ended up finding a Jesuit priest.
Really?
A Lutheran and Jesuit priest. And the two they became primary supports for one another through ministry. And it was such a beautiful thing to hear that. But
they could just be objective, right? Of just being there for each other. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Not having to worry about word getting back through a denomination or whatever. But
sounds like a great joke.
just
a Lutheran and a Jesuit priest walk into a bar, and they say you're going to hell. Anyway, probably. Sorry, this is the last one of these podcasts. Anyway,
YouTube removed it.
Yeah,
content. Yeah.
So let's bring up the other firepower. I didn't tell you about this, but this is awesome. So
Don't you love those words? I didn't tell you, but hey, yeah.
So, planner.
Yeah, these two are going to be international presenters
Oh my,
on a very interesting topic
for Scotland.
Like right now he's like, no, I gotta buy airplane tickets. You actually pinned me down.
Don't you guys leave in like 2 weeks or a week?
Yeah, 24th.
Okay, yes, I know about the whole what are they calling it? What's the whole trip called?
International Family Therapy Association.
Okay, yes.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what they labeled the trip.
It's called, what is it called?
What's
it called when you study? Oh, studying abroad.
Yeah,
So
it is studying.
okay,
So Hope is doing a studying
Yes.
abroad section, but it is for the International Family Marriage and
Therapy
Family.
Association.
That's amazing.
Yep.
So, but what are you guys doing your topic on?
Funny you should ask. We were actually looking at, from a systems perspective, we were looking at pastoral clerical burnout and how the functioning of the marital system may or may not offset rates of burnout.
Interesting.
So yeah, basically, like if my marriage is stronger, if I'm more satisfied with my marriage, is that going to bring down my level of burnout? And then the other way around, right? So if I'm not being able to come home, and the idea is if you're not able to come home, there's not support at home, because like you touched on earlier, the idea is that you often don't get that support from the church, or you feel like you can't get that support from the church. So now you're pretty isolated. It's the loneliest, like you said, one of the loneliest things. If I'm not going home and getting the help and support that I need, or I don't feel that I am, then is that going to make the burnout even worse? So burnout's bad. I come home, things aren't getting any better, and things already at my primary social support aren't going well. That makes the burnout worse.
Okay.
That's what we expected to find.
And then what are some of the common, I guess, issues that come up in family systems when one of the two partners is part of the church? Like,
How do you mean?
like, and because they're all looking at me like, huh? In my head, it makes
Sorry.
I think I know where you're going.
Sorry.
It's okay. Like, what issues have come up at home, like with wife, kids, from being a pastor?
Oh, I think the demand, just the demands. It's there's never enough of you to go around. Especially, I think it could be the same in really large churches, but especially when you have churches that tend to be on the smaller side. So maybe a church of, a couple hundred people, something like that, and that even may be a large compared to some church. But you only have maybe one pastor, one priest. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And so prepping for services and dealing with just like I said, just all of the issues that people come with, that they're struggling with, because you're basically meeting people across the lifespan, from births and marriages to deaths and sickness and everything in between, right? And so, like you said, you have to have an answer for everybody, and right, and you have to be that pillar for everybody. How much is left for home life?
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know how you guys do it. I mean, like, there are times when I come home from seeing clients, and then fiance will call, and I'm like, the last thing I want to do is listen to your life, and I feel so bad, and I'm like, I'm sorry, but it's literally like I have no more space in my brain or my heart to listen to any more words or to ask you how is your day, and then I feel bad because he's supposed to be priority, like family life is priority. Not that I don't love my students or my clients, but it's like, how do we do? I mean, have you ever had that? Like, you go home to Jill and you're like, I don't want to talk right now, Jill.
No, I struggle with it all the time because and it's awesome because I have a wife that we've come up with phrases, and it'll be like, so you hit your word quota today?
Oh yeah.
I hit my word quota today.
I like that.
And she's like, and she'll say, are you happy or are you sad? I'm happy. Okay, because then she can read me. Because a lot of it is me coming sitting down, and then I go just into like nothing face, right? And it's not, she can't read me. Are you happy? Are you sad? Are you pensive? What's going on? And it's like, no, I'm happy, believe it or not. I'm just tired. And so it's that you have to build communication with your spouse. But something that you're saying that I was like sort of wrestling with here in the second is like, imagine if my pastor had good boundaries. Like, in my heart, I'm like, well, if I call him and he's like, sorry, I'm with the fam, and I'm like, well, I got the busy signal from God, so I need you now to fire up the better line of communication and solve this problem for me. And that's even as an MFT and say, no, boundaries are important. But definitely, like, it was funny, I had a little movement of like, oh, he's talking about them having better boundaries. I don't know if we want to pull that off, but that is a discussion we're having.
Right.
But then there's that, but pastors are going to sense that pressure.
Yeah.
Right, without a doubt. And then so they're coming home feeling the same way that we all have. And I mean, congratulations, you're normal, right?
Yeah.
What you said. I mean, that's how it goes. But again, families struggle with that.
Yeah.
A lot.
It took a long time of figuring out those boundaries, figuring out how to work through my own feelings of obligation.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
Because obligation and faith and all that, like, there's no room for that.
It's muddy.
Yeah.
It all kind of blends together. And it took a long time for my wife and I to kind of navigate that. And it never perfectly, mind you. It's always, it's the whole balance thing. It's never sits like this. It's, you're trying to like keep it in the middle. But very difficult to navigate that. And it's nice because I think we grew a lot through that together. It stretched us both, and she developed a wonderful way of learning how to read me, and if something needed to be brought up, being very mindful of timing and when to do that, and so you kind of just roll with it, you know, as it comes. Yeah.
And that makes sense because I feel like as an MFT, we have like hours. Like we know when we're seeing our clients, and we have like if they text us after hours, they kind of know that if we don't respond at like 9 p.m., it's kind of okay.
Yeah, because you have informed consent, but you
Right.
never have informed
Yeah.
consent as a pastor.
And it's not
That's
a
a
scheduled
big
session.
thing, though.
Exactly.
That's a big thing.
So it's just like they can call during dinner time or like bath time with your kids or hanging out with your whomever. And it's like, right, like, do we get the busy signal from God? And like, why aren't you answering?
Yeah.
And that's I don't know how you guys do it.
Well, I think that brings up two really important things, though. And the idea is, first of all, are we, and this goes whether you're a pastor or whether you're a clinician, are we empowering our clients or our congregation? I'm getting my C's mixed up. Are we empowering clients and congregation in the first place, right? And I think we have that perspective as therapists. They drill it into us, and it takes us a few years to get it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's taught in most seminaries,
Right.
right? And then, so the second thing is, though, are we having the realization that while empowering them, we actually we empower ourselves to do our jobs better? Because I remember as a youth pastor, I would leave my phone on all night because I was also on call sometimes where I was working. So I'm working 40 to 50 hours a week, going to undergrad, almost full time. And I'd get calls from the kids in the youth group sometimes at 2 or 3 in the morning. And I got to get up at 4 in the morning to go to work. And it took me a few years to realize that, so if I took care of myself, I was better able to take care of all those other things.
Yeah.
Otherwise, at some point, I'm falling asleep or giving up or whatever. And so if you really, you do have that heart to help other people, you have to help yourself first, which is so hard for us to get. And then I think you help other people best when you do empower them. And how often is it, like you said, you might be getting the busy signal, but do you know whether or not you need that answer tonight?
Exactly.
Do we embrace, and I was going to kind of, going off of what we were saying earlier, I think another thing in the church is that we don't embrace mystery enough.
Ain't that the truth?
Right, but that comes all the way back to intertwine with this. We have not embraced mystery enough. As therapists, maybe we're a little bit better about it. I don't have to have the answer this week. My client can sit here and cry this entire session this week. And we have to learn to accept that.
Right.
But I think clergy don't do that. One of my favorite stories about St. Francis was that he would, for his the rest of his life, he would walk down the road every day and pray, who are you? And who am I? He embraced mystery, but we don't do that. We got to have that answer now, and the pastor knows they have to give that answer now. That doesn't empower you. That doesn't empower them. They're burned out, and ultimately, are you able to ever really be at peace?
Yeah.
If you think you have to have the answer now.
Yep. Are you chasing God to get your answer, or are you chasing self-will to get what you want?
Yeah.
That's the big thing right there.
Well said.
And also, like what you're saying is, I love that idea I'm seeing in my head of sitting in silence with your client, and it's like, well, sometimes you need to sit in silence with God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because sometimes I have found out more times in my own life the question that I'm asking God is not actually the question I want answered.
Yeah.
And so you sit there and you go, well, he's not answering this one. You want to know why? Because it's a crappy question. That's the plain nitty gritty of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
I love that.
I think it also preys on a certain liability that kind of going along with this that a lot of clergy, pastors, ministers fall into, and because their identity is so wrapped up often in the vocation of ministry, simply being there for people whenever they call becomes part and parcel to identity.
Yeah.
And if they fail to do that, or if they can't, there's something wrong with them. And that can be a very slippery slope.
So basically, if my congregation isn't growing in the faith, then I failed as a pastor?
Well, if I failed as a pastor, then I failed as a person. I failed as a Christian.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? Well, does it mean that I'm there for every person who calls at any hour of the night? Is that what being a pastor means?
Yeah.
Because if I don't, then I fail as a pastor, I fail as a person, I fail as a Christian. Yeah.
Right, and I don't think a lot of people or a lot in ministry take the time to answer that question. Well, what does this mean? What does this identity mean? Is this the totality of who I am, or am I Sam, who happens to be in a pastoral role, and what does that mean? It's a lot easier to set boundaries looking at it through that lens rather than that's my identity first and foremost.
Wow. That's a powerful perspective because, like you just said, I know, having just had conversations with you, I know the power that you bring as a pastor, but you do so as Sam, not as a pastor.
Yeah.
And so people don't, especially when you're around people that are in seminary, right? I felt like before talking to others who are trying to get there, it's like, oh, I'm gonna get my identity if I get this, right?
Yeah.
If I graduate from Talbot, if I go through whatever, this is how I get me. And the whole time they get to the other side and they go, well, I'm just hollow. You know, I don't have the me in it.
And I think that's why.
Dangerous.
I'll go for it.
No,
I think that's why you see throughout the Bible that theme all the way from the Beatitudes all the way through Paul's letters. There's always that spirit of humility that's so easy to miss. Like, blessed are the poor in spirit, right? I think that's the start, and you just realize, like, how does Paul introduce himself as an apostle, right, or disciple? Like, he's not introducing himself as, you know, this huge giant in the church, right? Which he obviously would have been aware that he was, but that wasn't who he was. How does he sign his letters? How does he introduce himself? Not as that, like, he does what you do, which is, hey, I'm Paul, I'm Sam, I'm giving you what I got out of love. Not because it's my identity, not because it's what I need to do. Yeah, that's it. That's it.
it is what it is.
Yeah.
And I think that, again, is just so empowering for the pastor. It's also empowering for the client or the congregation, whatever it is. But we miss that so much because, absolutely, like you guys are saying, we really do wrap our identity and our worth up in what we're doing. And are we having the answers because that's expected of us?
Yeah.
But nobody wins on that one.
No.
Nobody
no
wins.
So, absolutely.
So we've talked about a lot of stuff, some good stuff. What would you, let's say we have Joe Blow pastor sitting right there, struggling. He would just
Joe Blow, right?
Yeah.
Like, you had to think of all names, Joe Blow.
Like, what do you want your name to be?
Yeah.
Oh, that's Fred.
No, I mean for the
Yeah.
purposes of this. I remember
Is
Fred.
Joe Blow pastor a bad thing or just like okay? Like, anyways.
Sorry.
So Michael, the imaginary pastor,
Michael Blows.
Archangel. Anyways, let's get back to
Sorry.
it.
He's humble,
sorry.
so he goes by pastor.
Yeah, he
his
goes by
identity's
pastor.
not
So-
wrapped up in that.
Yes.
So let's say you have someone who's struggling, right? You don't have all the answers. Where's the first thing that you would advocate for him? Like, dude, do this for yourself. How would you, everything you know as an MFT, everything you know as being pastors, how do we speak to the listener who's driving their car, listening to this podcast, and wondering, like, what's my first step in getting help?
When they have questions
Yeah.
that they feel like they need resolved
Yeah.
now.
And we're talking to ministers and
DM to ministers.
Okay.
Oh, to ministers, okay.
I would say this, and I'm say this with absolute sincerity. I have so much respect and love for pastors who I've been blessed to work with, who come and say, "Hey, I'm struggling in this area, my marriage is falling apart, or I feel like a failure, or I have depression, or I have anxiety, or I'm struggling with, you know, this sin or that sin, or whatever it is." I mean, I rejoice when they walk in and I get to work with them, and they're vulnerable and honest, and I think more than any other population that I work with, that's where my heart is. And I know it's so easy to walk in and think like, this guy's gonna think I'm garbage. You know, because we assume people see us the way we see us in the mirror, right?
Right.
You know, with all our faults and failures. And, you know, yeah, if anybody out there is in ministry listening to this, get help. You know, it's so worth it. And like I said, I have the utmost respect. I sit in awe of those who are in those positions, who are willing to risk being vulnerable in order to just work through what they have to work through. So that would be my biggest encouragement.
Absolutely.
Sam?
Yeah, 100%. I think it takes so much strength to do that. And I always think of what Paul said, in my weakness, I'll boast in my weakness. In my weakness, I'm strong. And we usually, we all always see that as, okay, well, if I acknowledge my sinful weakness, but acknowledge your human weakness as well. And then you open yourself up to be able to become stronger. Because the facade can fall down. Yeah. The strength and the healing can come when you're willing to walk through that door and get some help. I always, not always, I have in the last few years, I remember God directing me one time in a time of scriptural reading to Jesus in the garden right before the crucifixion. And he's asking the disciples to pray with him. Can you not sit with me for even 1 hour? Yeah. And they keep falling asleep. That's like a lot of our clients and congregants, or as we are as clients and congregants, where I just imagine the disciples, and I think it's a reasonable thing to imagine, going, what can he be struggling with? Yeah. He's Jesus. He's the Messiah.
We've watched him heal everything.
Right. Clearly he's not struggling. He is at the height, right? His entire humanity is struggling. Right? Fully God and fully human. He is struggling with the greatest burden, the greatest fear, and he's asking, Christ is asking for that companionship, that help. Even he asks, God, if you could take this away from me, that'd be great. If Christ can do that, we can do that. Wow. We can ask for help. Absolutely. We can say, I wish this didn't happen. Can somebody help me out with this? Yeah. I'm struggling. Because if God does that, who do we think we are that we can't struggle with it? Yeah. That humbled me. I had to stop trying to be God. Because clearly I was failing at that too. If I'm not willing to be humble and admit it. So I would just offer that up for reflection, that it is okay. And I want to echo what you said. It takes the greatest strength to admit that we are not as strong as we want to be and as we think we are. Yeah. To admit that we're weak. That takes so much strength. My hat's off to anybody that can do it. And admire the heck out of you. Or the heaven out of you, depending on how you want to put it. Yeah. So.
I did have one other thing I wanted to ask. I don't know if you guys can speak because you're not wives. Or I don't know if you're children of pastors, but like...
Are we doing role play right now?
Maybe.
Is that therapeutic intervention?
It sometimes can be. Have you guys noticed any common struggles of like pastors' wives or pastor kids that you could maybe speak to or encourage how...
Oh, you're going to be an expert on this one. You're married.
Well, I think it's
kids.
Well, I think it's a lot of... It's just... It's the pressure. I think it's the pressure. The feeling that, I know my wife has said this so many times, and we've talked about this so many times. It's the immense pressure. What if she's having a problem? It's the same thing. Who's she going to go to? Oh, the pastor's wife is struggling. Right? People don't want to hear that.
It's a fishbowl for her too.
Yeah, the kids. It's the same thing. Oh, that's the pastor's kid acting out. Right? Yeah. So I would say, it's it's a lot of the same pressures on all the family.
Yeah. We actually had a comment from someone that you all know as well. So Teresa Wilcox.
Teresa.
Threw out one. It was awesome. So
I love her.
She wants to kidnap us all and take us to Honduras, which is hysterical. But within context, it's because in Honduras she does a missionary retreat for couples. And so that they can,
missionaries.
That's
awesome.
So that they can get
so needed.
MFT services and have a retreat and
that's super cool.
Work on themselves as much as work just on themselves and not the communities they serve. Just sort of like what we've been talking about. So in thinking about that, what about our discussion this evening? Would you have anything to add on top of for missionaries? Like,
that's a good question.
Well, I think just from the missionaries I know, it's a very similar position. That they're leading flocks and all of this. But a lot of the times they're even more isolated.
Oh yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I mean they're
Different
outside their
countries.
culture, right? Away from family, extended family, friends, all of that. They're kind of out there by themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, of course they're building relationships and all of that, which is wonderful. But it's even in those environments, it may even be a little more tenuous as far as how honest they can be, you know, with their congregations and things like that. So, yeah, a lot. Yeah, a lot of. I guess we always go back to pressure. But it may be even a little more acute for a lot of these missionaries, and then of course just, you know, especially depending where they are, just being out for long periods of time, years at a time, and just, you know, at least, you know, we can get out and, hey, well, let's get a babysitter and go to the movies or something like that. And like, no, it's not always the case with missionaries. So,
My thought was kind of, and actually tailing off of what you said, I think that it's important, because you don't always have that access where you are, to take retreats such as that. And I'm not trying to give a shameless, promotion for Teresa's program, but because I would think that it's very easy to go, okay, I'm done here. I was going to take a break, but this great opportunity and this big need is over here.
Yeah.
Take your break when you need it.
Yeah.
And let wisdom, discernment, self-discernment kind of guide that. When you need to take those breaks, maybe it's even harder to take those breaks, because it's not going to be like, oh, okay, well, I have a few hours free tonight on Wednesday nights. It's going to be a bigger deal, where you're probably going to have to make that your next missions trip is yourself.
Yeah.
But make your next missions trip yourself.
Yeah.
Right? And take the
should
time
be
to
on a
do
T-shirt.
that. Yeah, well, we'll get on that. You do T-shirts too?
Yeah.
There it is. There it is. All
Oh,
right.
perfect.
Right.
First customer.
Make yourself your next mission.
You know what's interesting is just sort of sitting here and listening to everything. It's flipping the script on looking at ourselves as imperfect beings, right? That the largest lie is that our imperfection is a curse, when in fact it sounds more and more to me like it's a giant blessing, because I am not called to be perfect.
That's right.
Absolutely.
I am imperfect. I am fallible. And it makes every day a lot easier to go through like that. It's not because I'm setting myself up to be short, like, oh, I'm fallible. But it's the idea of the fact that, I screw up.
Yeah.
I screw up as a therapist, as an individual, as everything. I'm never going to be 100% perfect.
Right.
It then becomes an opportunity to actually truly be able to experience grace and forgiveness and mercy and love and all of those things. If we're perfect, we don't need those things. Right? But the fact that we do have imperfections, and we screw up and we mess up in relationships, and we hurt people from time to time, and all of that, well, that's sets us up to be able to receive grace and to experience that and assimilate that, and right, and that's a really beautiful thing.
Yep.
Well, and going off of that, like, I mean, what are the two commandments from which everything else flows? Love God, love others, right? And so that idea is, you open yourself up to grace when you are able to be vulnerable enough to be loved. And I mean, that's it. And if I were to love you, I would know that you are not perfect. I would love you just as you are, not as you should be, because you're not going to be as you should be.
Yep.
As Brendan Manning was always a fan of saying, and I love that phrase. I'm able to love you, right? And so that would be a whole nother podcast. Is okay, but then what is biblical love? What is healthy love? What is holy love? Right? Because this is not a fluffy thing.
Yeah.
But I'm able to love you as you are. Be able to love me as I am. That kind of vulnerability is the kind of love that God has for us, who died for us while we were still sinners. If we were able to do that as pastors, clinicians, clients, it would absolutely change the game.
Yeah.
It absolutely would.
I can't help but think of like a situation I went through where I was sick and I forgot to cancel with a client, and so I got this I got the text, I'm here, right? And I'm like, well, I'm in bed. so like,
Been there a couple times.
I called my client. I'm like, I am so sorry, right? They gave me a ton of grace. Excuse me, but next time I met with them and they said, okay, so how much is a session? And I said, well, no, we have a 24-hour cancellation policy, right? Which most therapists do, and we're going to charge you if you don't cancel on time. I said, I've got to be honest. I didn't give you 24 hours, so I'm not going to take your money. Like, that's just being equal, right? And it was way more impactful than I realized it was going to be, right? But the second that we play from this level playing field, and we look at each other as we both can have bad days, regardless of what position I'm in, whether I'm your spiritual leader, I'm your mental health leader, whatever that is, we have that ability.
Yeah.
And I think that's really where it's at. I think we're seeing it also through dynamic pastors who let their cracks show, right?
Yeah.
Like stuff happens. Mental health doesn't skip you just because you're a pastor. Tragedy doesn't skip you because you're a pastor. And the more that we're able to show that and realize that, holy crap, we can actually model healthy muddiness, I guess, or whatever we want to say, just that the healthy bit of life is crazy.
Yeah.
Careful chaos. That's what it is.
And it's amazing because even if people don't respond to that right away, if they're willing to, it changes everything. It absolutely changes everything. There's what's his name? Britt Merrick, pastor at Reality Church in Carpinteria. Remember his daughter had cancer. I believe it was cancer, leukemia. And he was so vulnerable in these blogs and in his sermons. And I think in some ways they did suffer, but when you read what people were reading later, 2 years down the line, that had stuck around and stayed, and new people that had come in, it was amazing how much they learned from their pastor, who was not perfect.
Yeah.
How good people felt to be able to, in some way, contribute to their pastor's life, and how helpful it was for him to be that contributor on such a deep and loving and vulnerable level. Everybody was changed.
Yep.
From that, for the better. Everyone became holier. Everyone became more loving. That stuck around.
Yep.
If we did that everywhere, I mean, and heck, we might even be out of jobs. Right?
That
the power of that.
Right.
I wish.
Kind of.
I hope. I tell my clients, I'm looking forward to the day you fire me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But I think you also nailed something, as a fact that sometimes we short ourselves. We all can recognize people being affected through secondary traumas. We don't ever think about secondary healing, right? So when you talk about the ripple effect of the fact of like, wow, I was vulnerable at this time in my life, and then someone who that thing is present and center in their life is reading about it 3 or 4 years later. Because that's the thing. I might not ever meet that pastor, but I just met someone who was affected by it.
Yeah.
And you know what? It sounded like, wow, I stayed humble in the fact that it's going to be crazy. It's going to be hard. There's going to be tears. And sometimes you're not going to know.
Yeah.
Right? But you will thrive. There's so much hammered in, I think, on life that if you don't have the answer, then it's automatic fatalism. Like it's over. And it's not.
Yeah.
It's not.
Well, thank you guys for joining us.
You guys killed it.
I know. Thank you.
This was
a lot of
awesome.
fun.
Is there anything last comments or takeaways you want the audience to know?
No, I think all was said really well.
Okay. So their
Yeah.
contact info was on the video. I know that. But also, do you guys just want to say how they could get a hold of you if they wanted to have a session with y'all?
Yeah. Contact info should be there. Phone or email is
Perfect. Sounds good.
Yeah, I respond best to smoke signal or carrier pigeon. But email on there will also work.
Yeah.
So.
The whole problem is, how do you read the message from what they land on your car? It's like, it just looks like...
It depends on the skill of the bird.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes I just know someone's ticking off at me.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
We've all had that. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys
Thank you
so
guys
much
so
for sitting
much.
down, being
for having us.
vulnerable,
Thank you for
and
having us.
digging into this topic. So I look forward to where God takes all of us. I hope to have you guys back.
Absolutely.
So,
Have
We'll
safe
love to do
travels
it.
in Scotland.
yes.
Thank you very much.
Will do.
Yes. I can't wait to hear how that goes. So, international travelers and presenters.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys. As always, why is SessionWell here? It's for these conversations. It's to build community, whether you're licensed, you're pre-licensed, you are pastoral care, whatever it is, we're here for you. We're on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram. You all have a wonderful drive to work or whatever you're doing. Be safe. We'll catch you next week.
Bye, guys. Thank you.